Hello and welcome. If this is your first time here, I'm Ipsha. And if you've been walking these shadows with me for a while, I'm really glad you stayed. You might know Vixen After Dark, a place where stories unfold, where shadows linger, and where some nights take their time to unfold. But not every story waits for a season. Some arrive quietly, unassuming at first, and only later reveal how much space they intend to take. Vixen Beyond the Veil is where those stories live. This is a space for independent tales told in one arc. Sometimes in one sitting, sometimes across a few nights. Of the supernatural, the mythic, the unsettling, and the beings who learned how to survive in the modern world or were born long before it. Here you will find monsters and guardians, ancient gods and misunderstood villains, creatures of legend, and humans who brush too close to things they were never meant to see. The veil between worlds isn't gone. It's just thin enough to listen through. You're listening to Vixen Beyond the Veil. Tonight, we begin with the first story. The idol that wanted witnesses. This is part 1, The House with Opinions. Settle in. Take a breath. Let the rest of the world fade for a while, and let me tell you a story. Ayaan Sen had grown up learning how to share space with noise, movement, and people who rarely waited their turn to speak. For he had spent most of his life in a narrow apartment building in North Kolkata, where mornings began before the sun decided whether it was committed to the day, and nights ended reluctantly, accompanied by traffic, arguments, laughter, and the hum of ceiling fans that never quite managed to cool anything completely. At 20 years old, Ayaan was in his second year of college, studying literature with the quiet seriousness of someone who enjoyed noticing patterns more than declaring opinions. A habit that had earned him the reputation of being observant rather than outspoken, thoughtful rather than impressive, and while he did not know yet what he intended to do with his life, he had already learned the more important skill of watching without interfering. He lived with his parents and younger sister in a flat that had accumulated years in layers, with old calendars still pinned behind cupboards, books stacked 2 rows deep, and furniture that had learned how to make room for people rather than the other way round. And it was in this environment that Ayaan had first learned that houses remembered things, even when their inhabitants pretended not to. His father, Anirban, worked long hours in an accounts firm and carried himself with the tired confidence of a man who believed most problems could be negotiated away if one was patient enough, while his mother, Madhura, possessed a restless curiosity that expressed itself through impulsive decisions, sudden interests, and a fondness for objects that carried stories, whether or not those stories wished to be retold. Ira, Ayaan's sister, 17 and permanently unimpressed, moved through the world with the sharp efficiency of someone who had grown up online and learned early that enthusiasm was optional but sarcasm was essential. Her clothing oversized, her opinions unfiltered, and her loyalty to the city of Kolkata unwavering. For she considered noise a sign of life and silence a form of judgment. The four of them had learned over time how to exist together without colliding too often, each orbiting their own concerns, until the summer arrived and disrupted that balance in the way summers often do. The decision to leave Kolkata for part of the summer had not been planned so much as arrived at, shaped by a combination of inconvenience and opportunity. For Ayyaan's college had closed early for the break, Ira's school had declared an extended vacation due to renovations, and Anirban's firm had entered a lull that made the idea of working remotely feel suddenly reasonable. It was Madhura who suggested visiting Raghup Sen, Anirban's uncle, a man spoken of rarely and visited even less, living alone at the edge of a suburban town, several hours away, in a place called Uttarkanan. His name surfacing only during family conversations that involved inheritance, old disagreements, or vague references to how he had always been a little different. Uttarkanan, according to Madhura, was supposed to be quiet in the reassuring sense of the word, a green, respectable suburb that prided itself on trees, wide lanes, and the kind of peace people advertised when they wished to escape the city without admitting to it.
It would be good for the children,
Madhura said, already convinced.
Fresh air, quieter surroundings, a change of pace.
Ira groaned audibly.
A change from what exactly?
She asked without looking up from her phone.
The will to live?
Anirban hesitated, not because he disliked the idea, but because Raghup Sen was not a man one visited casually, and Uttarkanan was not a place he associated with visits that remained uncomplicated for long. Ayaan, listening from the doorway, felt a faint stir of anticipation that surprised him, for his memories of his granduncle were limited but distinct, marked by conversations that had always ended with him thinking rather than speaking. Ayaan remembered Raghup as someone who listened first and spoke later, a man who never dismissed questions, even the inconvenient ones, and who had once told him, years ago, that curiosity was not a harmless trait but a responsibility, a statement that had lodged itself firmly in Ayaan's mind despite his young age at the time. While Ira complained loudly during the journey and Madhura made lists of things she wanted to explore, Ayaan watched the city thin out through the train window, buildings giving way to smaller houses, shops spacing themselves further apart, and silence slowly learning how to stretch, until it occurred to him that he had never truly been anywhere quiet for longer than a night. He did not know yet that the suburb they were headed toward had been waiting far longer than that. By the time they arrived at the far edge of Uttarkanan, the suburb had begun to announce itself in absences rather than features. The air felt thinner, the sounds fewer, and the evening more deliberate, as though the locality had been designed to observe arrivals rather than welcome them. The houses were spaced with a courtesy that felt practiced, set back just enough to avoid intimacy, and the trees along the road stood still in a way that suggested patience rather than calm. It was here, at the end of a narrow road that appeared reluctant to continue, that Raghup Sen's house stood waiting, unchanged and unhurried, as if it had known they were coming long before the decision had been made. Its faded exterior was marked by the kind of wear that suggested endurance rather than neglect, the sort that accumulated when something was left standing, not because it was forgotten, but because it was deemed sufficient. Raghav stepped out to receive them, tall and spare, in his loose cotton kurta and neatly pressed trousers, silver hair combed back with habitual care, and for a brief moment Ayaan had the distinct impression that his presence seemed to complete the picture rather than interrupt it.
You took your time.
He said mildly, though no arrival hour had been agreed upon. Anirban laughed, setting down a bag.
The train disagreed with our schedule.
Raghav nodded as though trains were prone to such behavior and turned his attention to Ayaan, his eyes lingering just long enough to suggest recognition rather than scrutiny.
You've grown into your silence.
He observed. Ayaan smiled faintly, unsure whether the comment was praise or warning. Ira, meanwhile, surveyed the house with visible distrust, her expression sharpening as she took in the long corridors visible through the open door, the high ceilings, and the way the windows stood open without offering much of a view beyond hedges and sky.
This place looks like it has opinions.
She said flatly. Raghav considered her with interest.
Most places do.
He replied.
Few bother sharing them.
Ira wasted no time in declaring her displeasure, pacing through the house as though cataloguing its faults for later reference. Pushing open doors, peering into rooms that appeared undecided about their purpose, and commenting loudly on the way sound seemed to travel strangely, flattening itself against walls before giving up entirely.
Why does it feel like the house is listening?
She demanded, flopping onto a chair and immediately standing again.
And why does every room feel like it's waiting for someone who never showed up?
It's an old house.
Madhura said patiently.
Old houses feel like that.
No.
Ira replied, scrolling through her phone.
Old houses feel nostalgic. This one feels alert.
Raghav listened from the doorway, his expression unreadable, and when Ira turned to him and asked how he lived there alone without losing his mind, he answered after a moment's thought that he had learned which thoughts were worth keeping company. Ira did not find this reassuring. Ayaan, watching the exchange, noticed that the house seemed to respond more readily to raised voices, as though irritation travelled further than calm, a detail he filed away without knowing why. The suburb revealed itself properly through its children, as such places often did, and by the second evening, Uttarkanan had begun to shed its careful reserve in small, unguarded ways. Ayaan found himself intercepted near the gate by two boys identical in face but separated entirely by manner. Their bicycles leaned carelessly against the hedge as though they had stopped there out of habit rather than intention. They occupied the space with the easy confidence of those who belonged to it, speaking over the quiet without raising their voices, their presence making it clear that while adults in the suburb preferred distance and discretion, its children moved through the lanes with an unspoken understanding of where they could linger and where they could not. Ayaan noticed, not for the first time, that no one else was out on the road at that hour, despite the light still holding, and that the silence around them did not feel empty so much as selectively attentive, as though the suburb had chosen this moment and these interlocutors with deliberate care.
I'm Ritwik,
Said the louder of the two at once, grinning with the unearned confidence of someone who rarely felt the need to measure his words before gesturing casually toward his companion.
That's Rohan.
Rohan adjusted his glasses, nodded once, and opened his mouth to speak, only to stop abruptly when Ira stepped into view beside Ayaan, arms folded, expression cool and unimpressed, at which point his prepared greeting appeared to evaporate entirely, leaving him staring in a way that was neither deliberate nor subtle. Ayaan stepped forward, sensing the imbalance.
I'm Ayaan.
He said evenly.
We just arrived.
Ira.
She added shortly, her tone making it clear that this was information, not an invitation. Ritwik's grin widened.
City people.
Ira raised an eyebrow.
Suburb critic.
Rohan swallowed, nodded far too many times, and finally forced out,
Nice to meet you.
at a volume entirely unsuited for conversation, before immediately looking at the ground as though hoping it might open up and claim him. Ritwik clapped him lightly on the shoulder.
He does that.
Does what?
Stops functioning.
Ritwik replied cheerfully.
Usually temporary.
Rohan shot him a look of genuine distress.
Please stop.
Ritwik nodded.
Didn't think anyone new was moving in around here.
We're not.
Ayaan replied.
Just visiting.
For the summer.
Ira added with faint emphasis. Ritwik brightened.
That explains it.
Explains what?
That you don't look bored yet.
Ritwik said.
Give it time.
Rohan cleared his throat. Having recovered just enough composure to speak now that attention was no longer focused on him.
Most people don't stay long. Not if they don't have a reason.
And what counts as a reason?
Family. Mostly.
Ritwik glanced briefly toward the house behind them, his grin faltering just a fraction before he shrugged it off.
Or curiosity.
Ayaan followed his gaze but said nothing. Ritwik continued, his tone casual again.
So where are you staying then?
Ayaan gestured over his shoulder, not toward the house directly, but down the lane.
That way.
Rohan frowned slightly.
There aren't many places that way.
Yeah, unless you mean...
He stopped. Rohan stiffened. Ritwik looked again, this time more carefully, his expression shifting as recognition settled in.
Wait, you're staying there?
Yes.
The silence that followed was brief but dense, as though the air itself had recalculated. Rohan spoke first, hurriedly.
We didn't mean anything. If we said anything weird earlier.
About what?
About the house.
Ritwik said quickly, scratching the back of his neck.
Or the person who lives there.
He's our great uncle.
Ayaan said calmly. Rohan's eyes widened behind his glasses and he shook his head rapidly.
We didn't mean anything bad. At all. People respect him. Really. In a careful way.
Ritwik nodded just as quickly.
Yeah, respectfully strange. Not bad strange. Definitely not bad.
Ira snorted.
That somehow sounds worse.
Ritwik laughed nervously, then gestured down the road with forced enthusiasm.
Anyway, if you're going to survive here, you should probably know a few things.
Like what?
Rohan answered before Ritwik could stop him.
Don't walk certain roads after dark. Don't trust streetlights that flicker too often. And if a shop near the market road looks different than you remember, don't comment on it.
Ira stared at him.
That sounds like a threat.
Rohan flushed.
It's not meant to be. It's just how things are.
Ritwik smiled again, though it didn't quite reach his eyes.
You'll see.
And that's where we'll stop for tonight. Because some places don't welcome you, they measure you. If this one stays with you, let it. Beyond the veil, not everything needs to be understood, only acknowledged. If you found yourself drawn into this story, you can support the channel by liking, sharing, and subscribing. It helps these stories find the people who are meant to hear them. If you want part 2, it's coming very soon. Until then, thank you for listening, for sharing this time, and for trusting me with your attention. I'm Ipsha. This was Vixen Beyond the Veil. Take care of yourself. And when you're ready, you can step back into the world.